Hi, welcome my channel. Isla Bennett, a gifted architect, is accused of stealing her father's company. But she fights back with the truth, proving success is earned. Stay tuned. The penthouse ballroom of the Bennett Tower shimmered under golden chandeliers as San Francisco's real estate elite mingled, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. It was Vivian Bennett's 58th birthday gala, an event so grand it felt more like a high-stakes networking affair than a celebration. Isla Bennett, the CEO of Bennett Properties, arrived in a sleek navy gown, her posture composed but her mind wary. The invitation had been an unexpected olive branch from her stepmother, a woman who had spent the past year trying to discredit her inheritance. Isla had hesitated before accepting, unsure if it was truly a chance at reconciliation or another of Vivian's carefully orchestrated manipulations. As she moved through the crowd, polite nods and reserved smiles greeted her, but she could sense the undercurrent of skepticism in the room. Then, without warning, Vivian's voice sliced through the chatter like a dagger. "Return what isn't yours, Isla." The music abruptly stopped, and the room fell silent. Isla turned to see Vivian standing near the center stage, her manicured fingers clenched around a champagne flute, eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You stole my daughter's birthright," she spat, her voice carrying across the vast hall. A murmur of shock and intrigue rippled through the guests as heads swiveled toward Isla. Every instinct told her this was a trap, but even she hadn't expected this level of public humiliation. "Vivian, this is neither the time nor the place," Isla responded, her voice calm but firm, refusing to let emotion betray her. But Vivian was just getting started. "Don't act innocent. Everyone here knows you manipulated Edward on his deathbed. You took advantage of a sick man, stole the company from Celeste, and now you stand here like you belong?" Isla's fingers tightened around her glass. Of course, Vivian had never been able to beat her legally, so now she was resorting to public opinion, trying to turn the business world against her. A few guests exchanged glances, uncertain but intrigued. Others, who had once backed Isla's leadership, now shifted uneasily, unwilling to pick sides. Across the room, Celeste Bennett, Vivian's daughter and Isla's stepsister, stood with her arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She had never shown interest in Bennett Properties while their father was alive. But after his passing, she had suddenly developed a keen sense of entitlement. Now, she watched as her mother wove a carefully constructed narrative, portraying Isla as a scheming opportunist. Isla inhaled sharply, scanning the room for an ally. But all she saw was doubt. A whispered comment reached her ears. "I always thought it was strange how she suddenly took over right after Edward passed." Another voice joined in. "Maybe there's some truth to it. Celeste was supposed to inherit, wasn't she?" Isla's stomach clenched. This wasn't just a personal attack. Vivian was undermining her legitimacy in the very business community she had worked tirelessly to gain respect from. Then, Vivian delivered the final blow. "You should leave, Isla. Nobody here wants a fraud at this celebration." The words landed like a slap, and a ripple of murmured agreement followed. The humiliation was suffocating. Isla felt her breath catch, her fingernails digging into her palm. She had spent the last year proving her worth, growing the company, expanding its reach. Yet in mere minutes, Vivian had turned an entire room against her. She could fight back now, cause a scene in front of investors, clients, and business magnates, or she could walk away and strike when the time was right. Isla knew exactly what she had to do. Without a word, she set down her glass, turned on her heel, and walked toward the exit. The whispers followed her, growing louder, but she didn't let them break her. As the penthouse doors shut behind her, Isla allowed herself a single shaky breath. She had lost the battle tonight, but the war was far from over. The cold night air hit Isla's face as she stepped out of the Bennett Tower, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked toward her car. The moment the ballroom doors shut behind her, she felt the full weight of the humiliation settle on her chest. The sting of whispers and accusations still rang in her ears, and despite her composed exit, her hands shook with anger as she gripped the steering wheel. She had never felt so betrayed, so utterly alone. Vivian had just rewritten history in front of the entire business community. And the worst part was that some people had believed her. A lump formed in Isla's throat. but she swallowed it down. She refused to let tears be the last word in this fight. As she sat in the dimly lit parking garage, her mind drifted to her father's final days. She could still picture Edward Bennett, once strong and sharp, sitting in his hospital bed, his voice weak but his conviction unwavering. "You have the mind for business, Isla, and the heart for it too." His hand had been frail in hers, but his words had been absolute. "Celeste never cared for the company. She doesn't have the vision or the patience. I need you to promise me that you'll protect what I built." And she had. She had walked away from high-profile architecture projects, left behind a career she loved, and poured herself into leading Bennett Properties. She had spent the last year expanding the firm, securing new contracts, and saving jobs, but none of that had mattered the moment Vivian played the grieving widow and painted her as a thief. Her phone buzzed beside her, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Nathan Reyes, her father's longtime lawyer and executor of his estate. "Are you okay?" His voice was steady, but Isla could hear the restrained anger beneath it. "No, Nathan, I'm not." Her voice was tired, raw, but her words were firm. "She turned an entire room against me. She called me a fraud. And the worst part? People actually bought it." Nathan sighed, and she could hear papers rustling in the background. "Vivian knows she can't win in court, so she's trying to win in public opinion. But she's forgetting one thing." "What's that?" Isla asked, gripping the steering wheel. Nathan's voice hardened. "We have the truth, and we're going to use it." For the first time that night, Isla felt something other than humiliation, a spark of defiance, of purpose. She could crumble, let Vivian and Celeste rewrite the story, or she could fight back with overwhelming force. She exhaled slowly. "I'm not letting them take my father's company. Nathan, let's end this once and for all." Nathan didn't hesitate. "Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. Bring your laptop. It's time we remind the world exactly who Edward Bennett chose." Isla put the car in drive, her hands steady now. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The dim glow of streetlights flickered against Isla's windshield as she pulled into the underground parking garage of Reyes and Associates, Nathan's prestigious law firm. The moment she stepped into his office, she was met with the sight of stacks of neatly labeled binders covering his mahogany desk, each one brimming with irrefutable proof of her rightful claim to Bennett Properties. Nathan Reyes, ever the composed strategist, barely looked up as he flipped through a thick file. "You're right on time," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "We have a lot of ground to cover." Isla dropped into the chair across from him, the weight of the night still pressing against her shoulders. "Tell me you have something, Nathan," she said, her voice tinged with determination and exhaustion. Nathan slid a USB drive across the desk, his expression sharp. "Not just something, everything." He leaned forward, tapping the stack of files. Edward knew Vivian would try to contest the will. He prepared for it. With a deep breath, Isla took the USB and plugged it into Nathan's laptop. The screen flickered, revealing a video recording, a grainy but clear image of her father, Edward Bennett, seated in his home office, looking frail but resolute. "My name is Edward Bennett." His voice rasped through the speakers, commanding the attention of both Isla and Nathan. "I am of sound mind and body, and I have made the deliberate decision to leave Bennett Properties to my daughter, Isla." He paused, his sharp eyes focusing on the camera. "This is not a decision made out of sentimentality. It is one made from logic and foresight. Celeste has never shown interest in this business. Isla has." The recording cut to hospital visitation logs, showing Isla's frequent presence at her father's bedside during his final months, while Vivian and Celeste's visits were shockingly scarce. Then came financial records, detailing how Isla had expanded the company by 22% since taking over, securing major development contracts that had kept the company thriving. Nathan scrolled through the evidence, revealing court documents where Vivian had repeatedly lost her legal challenges against Edward's will. "This," Nathan said, tapping a page listing Celeste's direct statements, "is a transcript from a meeting 3 years ago, where she called the company boring and said she'd rather focus on lifestyle branding than real estate development." He smirked. "She declined a director position you offered her just 6 months ago, in writing." Isla exhaled sharply, absorbing the sheer magnitude of evidence before her. So why is she fighting for it now? Nathan leaned back, his fingers steepled. Because she wants the status and the power, not the work. He tapped the video file again. But this proves Edward made a clear, competent, and legally binding choice. A new fire ignited in Isla's chest. Then let's stop playing defense, she said, standing taller than she had all night. Let's make sure everyone hears the truth. The penthouse ballroom of Bennett Tower was still alive with clinking champagne glasses and hushed conversations. But the atmosphere had shifted. The earlier spectacle, Vivian's public accusation of Isla, had left an undeniable mark. People whispered in corners, speculating whether Isla had truly stolen the company from Celeste or if there was more to the story. And then, the doors swung open. Heads turned as Isla Bennett strode back into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floors with a confidence she hadn't felt just an hour before. But she wasn't alone. Nathan Reyes, flanked by 3 impeccably dressed legal associates, walked beside her, their expressions cool and professional. Behind them, 2 assistants carried stacks of binders, each one filled with irrefutable evidence. The moment was carefully orchestrated. Isla was no longer the humiliated CEO fleeing the scene, but the rightful heir to Bennett Properties. Armed with the truth, a hush fell over the room. Vivian, standing near the center of the ballroom, her champagne flute still in hand, visibly tensed. Celeste, beside her, shifted uncomfortably, her earlier smugness replaced with uncertainty. Isla could feel the tension thick in the air, but she wasn't here to argue or plead her case. She was here to end the debate once and for all. Nathan stepped forward first, his voice booming across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Nathan Reyes, and I was Edward Bennett's attorney and the executor of his estate. Earlier tonight, serious accusations were made against my client, Isla Bennett, regarding her rightful ownership of Bennett Properties. Given the public nature of these claims, we feel it is only appropriate that the truth be equally public. He gestured toward one of his associates, who set up a projector, causing a murmur of curiosity to ripple through the room. Before you pass judgment, I'd like you to hear directly from Edward Bennett himself. A click. The screen flickered to life, and the ballroom fell into complete silence. On screen, Edward Bennett appeared, sitting in his study, frail but sharp-eyed. His voice, though weakened by illness, carried absolute authority. My name is Edward Bennett, and I am of sound mind and body at the time of this recording. He began, I am making this video to ensure there is no misunderstanding about my final wishes. I have chosen my daughter, Isla, to lead Bennett Properties, not because of familial obligation, but because she has earned it. A few guests gasped audibly. Vivian's knuckles whitened around her glass. The video continued, showing clips of Isla at the company, reviewing blueprints, negotiating contracts, and leading meetings. Then, the footage cut to Celeste in a recorded conversation dismissing the business entirely. I have no interest in spending my life dealing with boring real estate deals, she had said 3 years ago, rolling her eyes at the thought of managing the company. More murmurs filled the room. Celeste went pale. Nathan took the floor again, his tone measured but firm. Furthermore, Vivian Carter has contested Edward Bennett's will 3 times, and each time, the courts have ruled against her. On page 5 of the binders my associates are distributing, you will find the official court rulings. His assistants moved swiftly, placing thick, neatly organized binders at every table. Guests flipped through the documents, scanning the evidence with growing unease. Isla stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. I have spent the last year expanding this company, securing major deals, and preserving my father's legacy. Celeste was offered a director position 6 months ago, which she declined. On page 12, you'll find the email where she called it a waste of time. More heads turned toward Celeste, who looked as though she wanted to vanish into the floor. Vivian finally snapped, her voice low and venomous. How dare you turn my birthday celebration into a corporate trial? Isla met her gaze, unflinching. That's interesting coming from you, Vivian. You invited me here just to publicly humiliate me. A beat of silence. Then, a voice cut through the tension. Gregory Thompson, the CEO of Bennett Properties' largest client, stood from his table. Isla, he said, his voice carrying across the room. I owe you an apology. I should have questioned the claims before assuming the worst. The dam broke. A slow ripple of applause began at one table, then another, until the entire ballroom was clapping. Isla exhaled, the weight on her chest finally lifting. Vivian and Celeste, stiff and furious, stormed toward the exit, but Nathan called after them. One last thing, any further legal challenges will be considered vexatious litigation. And we will be filing for sanctions if you attempt it again. Vivian spun around, her face contorted with rage. But the battle was already lost. Without another word, she and Celeste disappeared through the doors, leaving behind a room that now saw Isla for who she truly was, the rightful CEO of Bennett Properties. The doors had barely swung shut behind Vivian and Celeste when Vivian turned on her daughter. Her fury barely contained. You just stood there and let them humiliate us, she hissed, gripping Celeste's wrist tightly. But Celeste, for once, didn't meet her mother's gaze. She had seen the way the crowd had reacted, the way their carefully crafted lies had crumbled under Isla's undeniable evidence. The reality was sinking in, they had lost. And everyone knew it. Back inside the ballroom, Isla stood tall, shaking hands with Gregory Thompson and other influential business leaders who had once doubted her. Vivian could see it even from the hallway. Isla had won them over. And there was no undoing it. The room was no longer filled with whispers of suspicion, but rather conversations of support. Investors who had once hesitated were now eager to work with Isla, and clients who had pulled back were already discussing renewing their contracts. Refusing to accept defeat, Vivian stormed back into the room, her heels clicking against the marble with purposeful fury. The crowd fell silent, expecting another outburst. Instead, Vivian plastered on a smug smile and said, "Well, Isla, I must say, you certainly know how to put on a performance. But don't get too comfortable. You may have fooled them, but I know exactly what kind of person you are." Before Isla could respond, Nathan Reyes stepped in, his voice carrying authority. "Vivian, I'd be very careful about what you say next," he warned. "Your history of contesting Edward's will and repeatedly losing in court is well documented. And any further defamatory statements could be used against you." Vivian's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered, turning to Celeste for backup. "Tell them, darling," she urged, gripping her daughter's arm. "Tell them what she's done to us." Celeste hesitated. For the first time, she wasn't so sure she wanted to keep fighting. The truth was, she had never cared about the business until her mother had convinced her it was hers by birthright. And after seeing the overwhelming evidence, a sinking feeling had settled in her gut. Isla hadn't stolen anything, their father had made a deliberate choice. Celeste's voice wavered. She could feel every eye on her, waiting for her to confirm or deny Vivian's accusations. For years, she had let her mother dictate her battles. But tonight, she saw what that blind loyalty had cost them. Celeste pulled her arm free and shook her head. "I can't do this," she muttered. Then, with one last glance at Isla, she walked out of the ballroom, leaving her mother standing alone in the spotlight. Vivian's perfect composure finally cracked. She let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. "You think this is over?" she spat, her voice sharp with desperation. Nathan crossed his arms. "Actually, Vivian, it is." With that, security stepped forward, ready to escort her out if needed. The weight of complete and utter defeat settled onto her shoulders. And with no other the morning after the gala showdown, Isla sat in the sleek corner office of Bennett Properties, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. The weight of the past year, the court battles, the doubt, the betrayal, had finally lifted. The phone on her desk had been ringing non-stop since sunrise, but not with accusations or threats. Apologies poured in, from investors who had once hesitated to back her, from colleagues who had been too afraid to take a side, and even from business leaders who had once sided with Vivian's fabricated version of events. The truth was out now, and there was no denying it. Isla Bennett was the rightful CEO of Bennett Properties, and she had more than earned her place. Nathan walked in, a satisfied smirk on his face. Gregory Thompson just sent over the revised contracts. He doubled the initial investment offer. Isla let out a short laugh. shaking her head. Amazing how quickly people change their tune when they see the facts laid out in black and white. It wasn't just Gregory. Within a week of the gala, 3 major clients who had pulled back due to Vivian's manipulations returned with long-term commitments, solidifying Bennett Properties' position as one of the leading real estate firms in the city. The company's growth skyrocketed, adding 32 new employees, expanding into a second office in Los Angeles, and securing one of the largest development deals in its history. Isla had proven herself, not just as Edward Bennett's daughter, but as a leader in her own right. Then came the biggest surprise of all. Celeste showed up at her office. Isla had expected anger, resentment, maybe even another round of accusations. Instead, Celeste looked nervous, twisting her hands as she stood across from Isla's desk. "I need a job," she finally admitted, her voice lacking its usual arrogance. "Mom spent most of her savings on those lawsuits. And my trust fund doesn't fully mature for another 3 years." She hesitated before adding, "And I need a fresh start." Isla studied her stepsister for a long moment, searching for deception, but all she saw was genuine desperation. Against Nathan's advice, Isla offered her a junior marketing position, not out of pity, but because she believed in second chances. To Isla's surprise, Celeste accepted, and even more shockingly, she put in the work. They would never be close, and the wounds of betrayal still lingered. But for the first time, a foundation of professional respect was forming between them. As the months passed, Bennett Properties thrived, but more importantly, so did Isla. She no longer carried the shadow of doubt cast by Vivian's schemes. She had secured her father's legacy, but she had also built something of her own. That night, as she sat in her apartment overlooking the bay, Isla finally allowed herself to breathe. For the first time since taking over the company, she wasn't fighting to prove her worth. She had already won. 6 months after the gala showdown, Isla stood on the stage of a newly renovated event hall, addressing an audience filled with aspiring architects, young entrepreneurs, and business leaders. The occasion marked the launch of the Bennett Foundation, an initiative she had created to provide mentorship, scholarships, and resources for women in real estate development, a cause her father would have championed. The journey to this moment had been long and brutal, but standing there, seeing the excitement in the crowd, Isla knew it had all been worth it. Behind her, a grand piano gleamed under the soft stage lights. Music had been her first love, the art form that had once defined her. But now, it existed in harmony with her new purpose, rather than in conflict with it. As the evening drew to a close, she sat at the piano and played a Chopin nocturne, the same piece her father used to love. The notes filled the hall, resonating with everything she had fought for. Legacy, she realized, isn't just about inheritance. It's about building something lasting, something earned. And she had done exactly that. The story of Isla Bennett teaches a powerful lesson about resilience, self-worth, and earning one's place. Despite facing betrayal, public humiliation, and doubt, Isla proved that integrity and hard work triumph over entitlement and manipulation. She didn't just defend her inheritance, she expanded it, strengthened it, and made it her own. True success isn't about what is given, but what is earned through perseverance, skill, and vision. Isla's journey reminds us that our worth isn't defined by others' perceptions, but by our actions and determination to build a future we truly deserve.